Today is Saturday, February 18th. It's 8:53 a.m. and I'm here with another Satoshi Saturday, another Nick and Griff show Saturday with my boy. Griff, how you doing, man? I know you had your ACL surgery this week. How you feeling?
Like a peach, Nick. I've had a few surgeries. If you've played football long enough, you've probably had a surgery before. So, doing pretty well, all things considered. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. I got a fresh haircut yesterday, so I'm excited about that. Typically, I get my haircuts right after we do the podcast on a Saturday, and so I'm happy to be rocking a fresh cut for the show this week.
Our viewers deserve that. They deserve the haircut. They deserve you to have the haircut in time for the show. I mean, I'm just saying. They just deserve these types of things, Nick. So I'm really glad that you got that show this week.
You're not wrong. Yeah. Huge. Hey, shout out to the and I hope that I get this right because I know that I've seen stuff in Nigeria and in Lebanon, I believe. Shout out to all the people that are dealing with the bad money out there. I get on Twitter and it's like, man, they're burning banks down out there, you know?
Yeah, it has something to do with the fact that they're completely eliminating cash withdrawals, and most of the people out there to save. It's the easiest thing for people to do is save. Investing is hard, saving is easy. So everybody over there saves.
They've expired cash. You can't even use cash. Not only can you not withdraw it, now if you had cash, you can't use it.
What a fun world where it's like, hey, here you go. This dollar is only good for a month. Okay,
Griff, what else is happening in Bitcoin this week?
Well, the title of what happened in Bitcoin this week could be Bitcoin's future depends on a handful of mysterious coders. That is the Wall Street Journal. They still think about Bitcoin, and that's where they're still at. Other things that happened, obviously, the SEC shitcoin tour is what I would call it. I believe they're going after Terra Luna. And they kind of are accusing them of moving a lot of their Bitcoin before they were able to seize it. Super interesting because obviously Bitcoin, you can pretty much send it anywhere in the world. So it's really interesting to see how the American justice system plays in Bitcoin sometimes for people who are willing to quite literally hop borders and stay away. I've noticed on Nostr, it seems to be a wonderful marriage with the Lightning Network and Zips. Pretty cool. You can pay on Nostr to your buddies for content, or if you like their stuff, it gives them a micropayment, which I think is pretty cool. Obviously, something that a lot of social media apps would love to be doing, but it's already on Nostr. Pretty cool. Yeah. And then I was going to say Web 5, very much alive. Zion, the whole Bitcoin phone situation, still learning quite a bit about it, but a lot of the digital identifiers. Yeah, their Twitter page is quite interesting, but I'm still learning a lot about it. They just released a new app because their last app failed. So this is kind of like a semi-failed project, I believe, being resurrected, but it's a very cool idea. So hopefully they can get it done because they're extremely Bitcoin focused. And then the other thing was that Strike and Jack Mallers announced more involvement for Strike and businesses and API payments and things like that, which everything Strike does is huge. I think they're probably going to be one of the bigger Lightning platform, providers, would you say, Nick? It seems like they're definitely going to be a major player for sure. For quite a bit of time. It's a good exchange, and it's a good place for payments. The only other thing, really, besides, the attack that is always on Bitcoin currently is, and I personally don't think it's an attack. Do not let me think that, but Ordinals and inscriptions are still very much the hot topic in Bitcoin. And luckily, we have somebody this morning that can enlighten us quite a bit about Ordinals and inscriptions. If he might be literally the Satoshi or Satoshi of inscriptions, as far as I know, I've only watched him go off on Twitter about it. And I don't know that we have really established a take on this podcast. Our take is that, Bitcoin doesn't really seem to care. So if people want to do it, and that's how they want to spend their Bitcoin, I mean, Godspeed, right? I mean, nothing that we're going to do about it.
It's kind of funny, it seems like every so often things like this come up in Bitcoin where it's a little more controversial, I don't know that I would say that this is something. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought about it a whole lot. I'm excited to introduce our guest, Mr. Charlie Spears. He's been on with us before. He is a friendly Bitcoin miner. He also runs all of our Tulsa Bitcoin meetups, and super excited that he does that because he does a great job of it. Without further ado, man, let's bring on the Ordinal King here. Mr.
Hey guys,
Spears. Come on, sir. How are you doing today?
good morning. I'm great. I've been sleeping well, even though I've been working around the clock. I think I've been using the term "ordfluencer" lately as the colloquial term.
Ordfluencer.
Months ago I didn't imagine that.
I want to jump right into this, and I want to ask just a couple of questions to set a foundation for this conversation. So, give us first of all the rundown. What are ordinals? What is ordinal theory, I guess, and what is the most basic explanation of what its use is?
So the best explanation is going to come from the guy who invented it himself, Casey Rodarmor. What Ordinal Theory is, it's a way of tracking individual Satoshis or numbering individual sats on the Bitcoin blockchain. Casey describes it kind of as a collective hallucination. Really, it's just a shared scheme to track and number Satoshis on the Bitcoin blockchain. What does that look like? So when a block is mined, you kind of like look at the 6.25 Bitcoin that are created, and the first Satoshi kind of in a line in that block is going to be the first sat of that block. And the Genesis block, if you will, the first block that Satoshi mined himself, starts with sat 1. And then the second sat in that Genesis block is sat 2. And then if we go all the way through all the Satoshis which will ever be created, there will be like 22 point something quadrillion sats over the next 100 something odd years. And so this is not native to the Bitcoin protocol. This is not in the code anywhere. This is just a way of an added layer of interpreting what already exists on the Bitcoin code base. So it's really interesting. So like Casey describes it as like it's a hallucination. We're all going to start adopting this way of numbering and tracking the sats. And what that allows is a way to then start tracking like specific data or attributions to those Satoshis themselves. So when you send a Bitcoin transaction, there is a modest amount of data that you can associate with that called the witness data. And a finite amount of that data can fit into a Bitcoin block. And what inscriptions is a way of including information into the data, into the witness data, that we then tie to and track using Ordinal Theory to specific Satoshis. That is, I think I'm going to get better at explaining it over the years, and it's the kind of thing where you kind of you got to hear it a few times. I really just kind of stumbled onto this because I've talked about this on this podcast before, Nick. Like I like kind of outsider views of Bitcoin. I like stuff that's like outside the norm, stuff that like I've not heard before. And I heard this, and I was like, oh, this is a really interesting idea. So I, was hopping in and chatting with Casey and the really just like junior developer who he's got, just a little while ago, honestly. And through that kind of proximity, I found myself helping the unofficial Ordinals team scale what was originally a 2 or 3 person like side project into now it's like a 20,000 person Discord, and it's every single media outlet is trying to talk about this, and there's really no business plan, no coherent strategy. It's just run and gun, build stuff, and get excited. And I'll try to pause there so you can kind of ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, that's really good. That's from the video that you'd sent me. That's like spot on, exactly what he was talking about. I guess one follow-up thought on that would be, it seems like people for all of human history have been creating ways to objectively view and compartmentalize and label what is just objective, right? There are two trees, or this tree is this color, or this Satoshi is my Satoshi and not your Satoshi. Why would somebody, why is this such a monumental thing for Bitcoin? Why is it so, why is it a nuanced thing? Why does it feel like such a nuanced thing to be able to track individual Satoshis?
There is a number of ways I can answer that. I'll probably add a follow-up analogy. So Bitcoin is like the roads exist, they're built, and Ordinal Theory is kind of like drawing lines on the roads and saying, this is just how we're going to interpret and use the roads. And if everybody kind of works together to do it, then, we can use the roads in a certain way. And that's kind of what that's one of the kind of mechanisms that underpins this. It can be controversial for a number of reasons. Some of my opinions on why it is are quite critical of some attitudes within Bitcoin. I try to remain like more of a positivist. I get excited about the new things and bringing new people into the ecosystem, and then some of the really nuanced details of why this can be good, bad, or anything in between I'll leave up to some of the experts. But I've gotten a little bit better at wrapping my head around it. When this kicked off, so on January 20th, Casey shipped it's a client called the Ord client. So you run a Bitcoin node and you run the Ord client, which runs in tandem on top of that. And it just takes the Bitcoin core client, which sends transactions, and it adds an interpretation to how those transactions are sent. And he shipped that to mainnet on the 20th of January. And by February 3rd, Jimmy Song and Pierre Richard were losing their minds about it totally breaking and collapsing the entire Bitcoin network. And I think that the answer, I think that I don't think it's super straightforward whether what the long-term effect is going to be. And it has huge effects from a miner standpoint. This is actually kind of one of the reasons I was looking at it, is because one of the big conversations right now, and has been one of the big criticisms of Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin's block subsidy, which gets halved every year or every 4 years, goes down. And so the question is that going to be enough to sustain the Bitcoin network and the mining network? Because otherwise, because ultimately we all understand that the network, and it's intuited by Bitcoiners, that the network has to sustain itself off of each block, the transaction fees in each block. Where are the transaction fees? Where is the demand for this block space going to come from? And I'm interested in things that create new ways and new demand for block space. What these inscriptions do is add a new element of pricing block space. It is going to make it more expensive to use Bitcoin, and that has always been the plan. Now we can argue over how should it make the block space more expensive, more valuable, and we can argue over the specific pricing scheme and the incentives that are created from it. So I don't know if I actually answered your question, but this touches on where the nuance of where if this is good, bad, or how this goes. That's where the nuance lies.
That's so interesting.
Love it. Griff,
do you view Bitcoin as money? I mean, is that your view on Bitcoin? Do you view its base layer? Obviously, there are properties of money. So it's not like Bitcoin just gets to decide what money is. But do you feel like it's money more than anything else? Or do you feel like it's more of a public record more than anything else?
I may have mentioned this on the podcast earlier. I have always thought it is money. Is its only purpose money? What is the real big picture of Bitcoin? I've always maintained that that the current consensus and understanding of Bitcoin is insufficient. and that the picture of what Bitcoin is much broader, and that it's probably, if I can imagine, it's probably more a new consensus paradigm for a lot of things. Money is like clearly one of the bootstrap mechanisms for that, because money is itself a communication layer. So we had this argument. So one thing is like Ordinal Theory, the tracking of Satoshis is not new. Casey, kind of like Satoshi themselves, didn't really invent a whole lot of core new concepts. They really combined a lot of things which already existed in a novel way, and were able to kind of ship that to the world. And so in 2012 and I believe 2014, we saw things which are analogous to Ordinal Theory, or tracking and identifying sats on the chain. We saw those already kind of be concepted and floated, and they never really took off. What Casey really did was clearly define these, then build out tooling both on the client side, which interprets this, and on the kind of like user-facing side to be able to display the actual content that we can inscribe on chain. That's what's novel, is he kind of like provided the tooling to be like, okay, here's the idea, go use it. And so one of the reasons why it's become so like wildfire in the center of all the conversations, because all the NFT folks immediately, for the past 2 years, NFT people have been degenerate on other chains, really confused, a lot of frivolity on these other chains. They're like, oh shit, Bitcoin, this is cool. And they immediately came in and started putting JPEGs on Bitcoin. And so, I think we can criticize like the worth of those things, but like they were able to immediately do that. It requires some command line familiarity and, kind of learning some archaic, some like somewhat inaccessible like techniques, but like they were able to already just be like, oh look, there's the NFT thing that I put on chain, and here we are going, well, it's not really an NFT, it's an inscription which actually has fundamentally different properties. And this is kind of what Bitcoiners have been saying for a long time. This blows my mind that we kind of like, now that it's happening to Bitcoin, we were like terrified. Is that like we've always said that these things which happen on other blockchains will coalesce onto Bitcoin long term. This is the early version of what that might look like. Is it going to be inscribing JPEGs on the Bitcoin blockchain? I don't know. But really what it is, JPEGs and images are really one form of data, and this really allows you to put data on the Bitcoin blockchain. The conversation over whether Bitcoin should be a data layer or a monetary layer is very old. It's a decade-old kind of argument. And I don't really lie on one clear side of the fence here. My view is that we had the block size war so we could define a pretty clear limit to data, or a ceiling onto the data, that the amount of data that the Bitcoin blockchain should contain. And this is the natural evolution of discovering and utilizing what data layer the Bitcoin network can facilitate. It's not going to break nodes for a long time. Right now, it's the Bitcoin blockchain, or full node is like 500 gigabytes. If we were to fill every single block 4 megabytes starting today for the next 10 years, my existing software on the node I run behind me could run it until 2028. So it's quite cheap. It's quite trivial. It's really not going to break a whole lot for the average pleb for some time. What could, and there's some data and some analysis which will emerge on this over time, and we'll really be able to flesh this out. What does this do to the pricing of financial transactions versus what we would call data transactions? That's a good productive argument and conversation to have. The more I learn about it, the more I used to be pretty agnostic about it. The more I learn about it, the more I think it's probably actually pretty close to fine how it's currently priced. But I have learned. How does
that happen, Charlie? How do you actually sell the picture for more than one sat? Because obviously it's going to get inscribed as one. How do you actually get the money.
So this gets into what are called Bitcoin unspent transaction outputs, which is the actual way that Bitcoin is sent from account to account. Because you don't actually say, I'm going to send a whole Bitcoin from Charlie to Griff. It's actually really like a ledger entry of like Charlie sent Griff, X Bitcoin and got X change back. It's like an unspent transaction output is like, I owe you 25 cents, but I've only got $1, so I'm going to pay you $1, and you're going to give me 75 cents back. That's kind of like the big picture. UTXOs, or unspent transaction outputs, are a little bit arcane, which Bitcoiners have not really had to understand, but now will have to understand. So what happens is the actual transmission of the SAT is tracked in the UTXO. So like the first SAT of the UTXO is like the SAT that we track. And then if the person on the other end also tracks it, they'll be like, yeah, I got that inscription. You don't have to even play by the rules to like receive an inscription. It's just that if someone else like indexes all the UTXOs which have ever happened, they can be like, oh, here's where all the inscriptions lie.
Okay.
Right now, there's not a super easy, trustless way to exchange them, which is just indicative of how early this is. It's been 20 days since this release. So, I mean,
so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's so
Charlie.
I'm sorry, Nick.
Oh, I was going to say, Charlie, with the inscriptions on an individual Satoshi, how are you able to? And this is just something that may just be simple. I just don't understand. How are you able to go into, say, your wallet or wherever you're storing the coin that you're doing what you're playing around with? You're able to select that individual Satoshi and say, I want that included in this amount of Bitcoin that I'm sending to this person. So you're able to isolate and send and receive individual Satoshis. Is that correct?
That's correct. And this happens not on the Bitcoin Core client side or not on a normal Bitcoin wallet, but rather on the Ord wallet, which just says we're going to draw those lines on the road and we're going to make sure that, this SAT that we've identified has this is tracked and sent the right way. Technically, you can do this with any Bitcoin wallet. It's just that because those Bitcoin wallets don't track those Satoshis, you don't actually have control. It's kind of like you could send it, but you might actually accidentally send it, and that SAT might be given to the miner's fee. So Bitcoin already does this. It's just interpreting it on a little bit higher level.
Okay,
but
I would say
it's like these SATs are we're probably getting into the fungibility, but it's like you get $1 for your first $1 for a new business, and you right, this is our first $1 on that $1, and you hang it up on the wall, and you could technically go spend that $1 at any business. They probably don't care. You care about that $1, and you might forever hold that $1, or you might if it's a famous business like Amazon's first $1, that might be worth more. But technically, that $1 is still fungible, and there are people who will attribute that $1 as only being valuable as a $1. So it doesn't affect the fungibility technically. It kind of affects the social consensus of what is a fungible SAT.
Well, does money
that's
have
a big distinction? Yeah.
Does Bitcoin have to be fungible for it to work, though? I mean, that's another serious question, because in the future, right, all these ordinals and inscriptions are doing, or you're basically saying, hey, for one Satoshi, which is nothing, for one Satoshi, you could put the Constitution of the United States on a public ledger. You could put any type of information on there, and does it mess up fungibility? Yeah, sure. But can we still communicate the value with Bitcoin without everybody understanding one Bitcoin is definitely still mostly one Bitcoin. There's just these ordinals out there that have these important pieces of information on them. I don't know.
That's a really good question. This is probably Nick, you really phrased, Griff, you really phrased one of the most interesting questions that I think we're going to have to this is probably going to make me think a lot. Like, does Bitcoin have to be fungible? I would say, I would make this statement. I have a hard time ever imagining Bitcoin fulfilling its purpose if it is not fungible on a technical layer. Like, if one sat does not equal one sat, from a technical standpoint,
Right.
I have a hard time imagining Bitcoin would be truly like what Satoshi imagines.
Yep.
I think we will probably. What happens is like the social consensus. I'll also say this: there is a finite amount of Satoshis that you can inscribe, and we can pretty much mathematically define this. And it's like less than 0.1% of all sats, assuming the existing schema for ordinal theory and inscriptions is the like one that will dominate for the next century. Let's just pretend this, and let's just assume we start inscribing everything as much can be physically inscribed into Bitcoin by limit of the current block size. I believe the upper limit to what a Satoshi, like how many Satoshis can be special, is something like 0.1% of the entire Bitcoin network. So like, even if the argument is that it challenges Bitcoin's fungibility, the vast majority of Bitcoin technically cannot ever be unfungible, or whatever the opposite of fungible is. So I'm a bit of a purist, so I think it should be kind of all or nothing. So it should technically all be fungible. But Griff, that is a really good question, and I'm probably going to be thinking about what the best way to answer that is for a while.
Well, I just think that it's really interesting because Bitcoin does change economically. It changes the definition of a lot of things. Like if we're really all going to use this Bitcoin network, digital security should cost nothing in regards to like how that economy should run. I mean, if there's a whole bunch of friction in regards to like, if we have friction in regards to digital property rights, that would be the most counterintuitive thing to Bitcoin ever. Bitcoin is basically supposed to make property rights seamless. So it should be almost free. It should be as free gets. And with all these really cool Web 5 platforms coming out, I love that he did Web 5. Makes me so happy. It's just so funny. But with all of these Web 5 things coming out, that's how you're going to have to secure information or data, is what I'm saying. Regardless, you're going to need to utilize Bitcoin in some way because it's the only immutable public ledger that everybody can use and all recognize at the same time. Yes, that transaction happened, but what also like, yes, that is this guy's profile picture. You can verify it here, boom. I mean, and it should really only cost one Satoshi. It might need to cost less. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see. Charlie, I've got I want to ask another question here, and this will kind of be the last piece we'll wrap up, so that we're not being too long for the Satoshi Saturdays.
I love talking about this though. So
and maybe we'll have to continue on for an additional piece of the conversation. But last piece for all the people that are here at this point, talk a little bit more on the inscriptions and the actual data that you can put on the blockchain. And also, I want to kind of pair this with also the idea of, you're talking about the roads, right? The roads is the Bitcoin network without the lines, right? That we agree upon as, this is my lane, that's your lane. This is how we're going to navigate. It's almost like you put on a pair of, augmented reality, like sunglasses or something, to where then you can see all of these things that are actually happening under the hood that you can't see without the sunglasses. So my thought is, can things that are in the blockchain impact you if you don't have those glasses on, right? If you're not viewing things through that. What is the data? What is the limit to the data that you can put in there? Can you put videos? I mean, I know we're talking about very small amounts of size as far as data, but can you put videos? You put pictures? Like, what can you actually put in there?
The analogy you use, Nick, I don't know if you borrowed this from something Casey said, but like, it is kind of like putting on kaleidoscope glasses or something. That is like a common analogy he makes. I I don't really know if we know. I don't know if I know enough yet to really like imagine how it might change how the Bitcoin network fundamentally works. Like if this really takes off and does like this kind of marks the beginning of like a very dominant trend of this type of interpretation of Bitcoin. I don't see how it can't. I see it. It has to affect Bitcoin somehow. Does it? I think if the average user in an emerging third world nation can't subvert their government by using Bitcoin, then I think this is probably a bad thing for Bitcoin. As it is, I have a hard time seeing how this actually really affects that too much. And I actually think this probably, I think it actually is probably ultimately good because they can use Bitcoin for a lot more interesting things now. So it is like putting on new lenses. It's so early, like that. I struggle to like really land on like where I think the trajectory lies here, and that's why I'm so fascinated by it, because I love the Bitcoin is hard money, self-sovereignty argument, and I've said I love this, I endorse it, but like, I'm, Bitcoin, the world of like the Bitcoin narrative is kind of like a corpus where some are like the white blood cells, like keeping some of the purity of and health of the body, whereas others are kind of like the heart and the eyes, and they look up and they see around, and those may be attack vectors, but those are also the way the body navigates and grows and builds itself. And this is one of those things where it's like something totally new, which we've never seen before, and that's what fascinates me. And my heuristic for like, is this good or is this bad? Is this bringing more people into a pro Bitcoin and we're going to use Bitcoin stance? And let me tell you this: I've spent the past decade proselytizing for Bitcoin. I spent the past decade tirelessly out of my own pocket trying to get everybody and anybody and everybody to buy more Bitcoin, use Bitcoin, download a full node. And in the past month, I have helped more people not just download and run full nodes, but also dig into a lot of the obscure stuff under the hood that even myself didn't quite understand. I have helped more people in the past month do that by a factor of 10 than in my past decade of trying to get people to do this combined. It is like night and day. And I like to say this: we can loathe the frivolity of the NFT JPEG crowd as much as you want, but and we can say, oh, they're using it wrong, but these people are figuring out how to download Bitcoin Core, run Bitcoin D, and run it all from command line. And God help anybody who stands between an NFT person and their JPEG. They will figure out how to do whatever, and they will move mountains, and they will figure out how to run Bitcoin Core. What is crazy is these people are already saying things, in just like a matter of a month, going from Bitcoin doesn't do anything, it's dumb, Ethereum's the future, to I'm inscribing things immortally onto the Bitcoin time chain. This is our dream. We have like hoped people would like call Bitcoin this immortal, immutable network for so long, and now they come flocking and they're onboarded natively to like the details and obscurities of like how Bitcoin works under the hood. I think ultimately that's good. This will open up new Pandora's boxes of like things that we're going to have to work on and things that we're going to have to like dial back. But like, this takes Bitcoin's user base and doubles it. This takes the node count and triples it. This takes the general knowledge in the Bitcoin like space and disseminates it on a much deeper, broader level. So I'll be a part of the vanguard helping push that forwards. And I trust, because Bitcoin is this network which like just survives and it just evolves and mutates into this like resilient, unattackable kind of like organism, it will survive. Do you believe everything's good for Bitcoin? Because if you do, and you've said that mantra for the past several years, this has to be good for Bitcoin. We can now talk about witness data discounts, the pricing and incentive mechanisms. Those are good conversations to have. I think if we're arguing over whether a JPEG is worthwhile to inscribe to Bitcoin, take it up with Mises, because value is kind of what the market pays for it. The market determines those are valuable.
Such a good point to end this, Charlie. So fun. What a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on with us again. I know you're a busy guy, very sought after, this guy right now. Charlie, thank you for joining us, man. And we'll definitely be continuing this conversation. So those of you that are just listening on Satoshi Saturdays here, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week. If you want to stick around and listen for a longer conversation, stick around and come find us on Twitter at Nick and Griff Show. Also find Charlie at CB Spears on Twitter. And if you're not watching video right now, we are on Spotify and on YouTube with video. Charlie, would you say that Twitter is the best place to find you, get in touch with you?
Yes, I've reached inbox escape velocity, so I will try to respond to DMs. But yeah, that's the best place to reach me. And find me on Discord. That's kind of where I spend all my time these days.
Beautiful.
Same.
Well, thank you for coming on again, Charlie, and we'll see you next time.
Rock on.